Hello and welcome to Mental Health. It's a Trap. We're your hosts, Susan and Stephen, mother and son, unraveling the complexities of the mental health traps people fall in. Join us on this podcast journey as we demystify the mental health labyrinth, explore common issues, and provide you with tools to navigate this sometimes extremely daunting terrain. You can expect engaging conversations, personal stories, and probably also have a laugh or two. Access to mental health care should not be what causes you additional stress. We invite you to follow along, and together we can embrace the darkness.
Hello, and I'm Susan, and I want to just share with you that we will be covering areas such as tips and tricks, looking at anthills, molehills, and mountains, real-life experiences that include crisis, grief, loss, unaliving, the CRS Model, and other mental health struggles such as anxiety and depression. We'll also be looking at cracks in our systems. Part of the reason why we are starting this podcast is because of our own personal experience over the loss of my daughter and Stephen's sister, and how that relates to depression and anxiety and finding support through that grieving process.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing for people to talk about, because I think oftentimes people will be grieving and then be diagnosed with something like depression, and then they get stuck with a label that carries them maybe deeper into depression or feeling like they don't understand their grief. And I think it's great to kind of, help people, navigate, am I depressed? Am I grieving? What's the difference? And also when you add like personal experience, it can help people better understand their own stories and their own journey. And with that said, is there anything that you'd like to share about your experience with grief and loss after the death of Stacy?
So part of my experiences during this journey, and it has been 21 years since Stacy has died, was that early on in the beginning, I felt like I was the only person that was going through this, and then spent a whole year of just going to therapy and trying to understand the sudden loss and, what role that played in my life and with my family and friends. And, so that was quite the journey. And then I was fortunate to find a group, though going to that group was overwhelming because I realized I wasn't the only one experiencing the loss of a child. And that group was really helpful in my experience and allowed me to pay forward to others who came after me. And just learning to navigate and figure out how to live life again without her. And going through all of the emotions of special events and holidays and things like that were challenging, and I had to figure out how to do those things again without her. So, that was part of my experience, and, I still miss her every day and wish she was here, and know that she is not here, and how do I keep her in my life to help me get through the days that are tough. That's been part of my experience. What has your experience been?
I'd have to say it's similar, from a sibling experience, and I think that's one of the big things is oftentimes people compare, regardless of the loss, like who it is, the relationship. And I think that happens a lot between grieving parents and grieving siblings. And I want to say that a lot of my experience has been, I want to say different, because I always sometimes tend to feel different in my experiences with the other grieving siblings that I've met, and how I came to the Compassionate Friends, the group that you're kind of talking about, and the support that you get from it is awesome, because again, you don't know, right, who's out there that's like you or who gets it without having to say much about it, and not having to share if you don't want to, again, but knowing that they kind of understand the pain and the suffering that you go through, but also the labels of, oh, you're a sibling and siblings don't deal with their grief. And I think that's a big thing with parents, that, you know, they don't think their child is grieving when, you know, it's, you know, I was 16, so navigating being a teen and having a job and sports, and those were just a part of my routine. And I don't think parents always understand, like, their child still has a routine that they're going through, that it's like there's something wrong with them. And I know we kind of had that discussion because I was a part of a panel.
Yes. Yeah, we did have that.
You asked me and you said you were fine with it. But I also don't think you were expecting the answers. If you want to talk a little bit about like what your experiences was hearing your son, if you remember. I mean, it's been a while.
It has been a while.
About me being honest about my experience as a sibling.
It's a little vague, I'm not going to lie. It has been a while. Though I don't really recall. So if you want to share a little bit of what you remember, and then maybe that'll jog your mother's memory.
Same boat. I just know that, so in the Compassionate Friends, they have chapter meetings, and some of them will do, what do you want to call them? Like, not like a subgroup, but like we did a panel about bringing in siblings to talk about their experience with grief and their parents, and how they might hover, or how better parents can support their surviving child or children. And I just remember like being honest, and you'd be like, oh no, you're fine, you can say whatever you want. And then I just remember, like, from Linda, that you weren't expecting it to be, not that I was so honest, but maybe you felt it differently than you had expected you would have, if that makes sense. Like you had more of a reaction in your body to what you were hearing from whatever I said.
Well, and I think, I mean, I don't recall all of the exact things. I do remember having the panel at the church and having the siblings share what their experiences have been, versus parent loss, which it is different. And sometimes I think that parents get so caught in their own grief that they don't see the grief of their other children, if they have them. And then when they do, they have all of these other thoughts and beliefs of one thing, and then hearing the honesty can be, you know, I think it's hard, though I think it's necessary for parents to understand what their children go through, because, you know, it's often more about what we're going through. And, you know, I think that it's important to be able to, you know, see how it's impacting your kids. And it's hard for kids to talk about it too. I mean, it's really hard. I mean, you were a teenager, and, you know, just dealing with teenage stuff and all other things. And so, you know, adding grief on top of that and the loss of your best friend is kind of like a whole different set of emotions and feelings for you. And hard for a parent to understand, because it is a different relationship. Though I think by sharing and communicating, you know, what those experiences are for each relationship type is really helpful in, you know, finding solutions to better support one another through that process and that journey.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a big thing, like communicating, which has not been easy for us.
Nope.
But I think that, I don't know if that it happens like often, because it's usually something that does come up like in sibling panels when parents are allowed to ask any questions they want, and they're going to get like candid responses from grieving siblings. And sometimes it always seems like that's always a question, is like, how do I, support my surviving child? And communication comes up often.
Yes.
And I think that's difficult because I think when you're in your griefs individually, that you can be more reactive to things from the pain, and not because you're like necessarily angry, although the people we love are where we direct our anger towards. And then it's an interesting like nuance of how do you communicate? How do you tell someone to communicate when you're not communicating, but you want to communicate?
Well,
Support
exactly.
each other.
Right. So, it's like we want the truth and then we don't want to hear the truth, right? And so the truth can be hard for people, because it's also a time when we have to look at ourselves and say, what am I bringing to the table? What do I need to look at? What do I need to change in order to be able to communicate more effectively with others? And, that's really hard. And it's can be particularly hard for parent-child relationships, right? The child, or the teenager or the young adult is trying to figure out who they are, and the parents like holding them back, saying no, I'm not ready. And a parent's perception of how their child is doing through grief is very different than the child's perspective. And so that's where the kind of tension and chaos is in that piece. So if there's other layers of other things outside of the grief and loss of challenges and struggles that people experience, that also gets brought into it. So now you're trying to navigate just not even communicating, but what about all the other stuff that's getting in the way?
Yeah, and I think our experience is different. You can correct me, because I feel like most of my anger toward you most likely has to do with daddy and being a child, and again, all the things that we don't know, right? Because like depending on the age that you are, like being 16, and people are younger than that when people die, and navigating that, and navigating sexuality and all those things. And obviously I'm better now, but still I'll also say SHIT head, because I know sometimes you're not allowed to swear on podcasts. But yeah, just recognizing the change that needs to happen, like being able to look inward is a challenging thing to do, because again, you have to confront the thing, and it can be easier to sit in comfort, but you've always done.
Yeah. We go to the unhealthy, comfortable places. That's what I like to call it, even in my field of work. It's unhealthy, comfortable places, and we go to those places because they feel safe, even though they might be unhealthy. And so, I think that by doing work and looking at ourselves and understanding who we are as individuals and what we bring to relationships can really help foster healthier relationships. And I look at it as like learning how to dance. When you learn how to dance, you step on toes, you might put hands in places that they should not be, people feel uncomfortable with it, and so you start to kind of navigate the dance, and okay, I'm not going to step on your toe, I'm going to move this way, and it's kind of like that, finding balance in the relationship. And it's a forever journey, because we change and we grow, and sometimes we step backwards and then we move forward, and it's really all about how to find that balance in connecting with others. And, and that can be in grief and loss. It can be people struggling with anxiety and depression, all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's just a little tidbit about us. And, we definitely want to make sure that if you have any questions, if there are any other topics, like when we start adding more episodes, if there's more that you want to hear on a topic, we really value your feedback and want to make sure that if there's anything that we haven't touched on that you might be interested in hearing from us and our thoughts and opinions. And we're also going to bring in other personal stories just to make it, more relatable and authentic. And, this is about us and this is about you and other people and how it can benefit, a change or growth in your life, or maybe helping you to better connect with others through either, again, our experiences or the stories that we share from the people that we've connected with. Again, whether it's anxiety and depression, substance use, unaliving. We've been through more stuff other than grief and loss, and we definitely want to hear from you and your thoughts about, how we can connect and how we can grow.
Sounds good to me.
Huh.